Welcome to the FileMaker User Group meeting for March 2015. I'm Richard Carlton, and I'm going to be kicking off this user group meeting. Now, this is a recorded version of this user group. This meeting was originally broadcast live, but we've gone ahead and done a little editing of the video and are now making it available online to everyone. This user group meeting is taking place at the offices of FileMaker Incorporated, headquartered in Santa Clara, California. I highly recommend that you look into joining and attending a local user group meeting of your own, because these user group meetings are a great place to exchange ideas and learn a great deal of information about the FileMaker platforms, about strategies, tips, and tricks. I can't say enough good things about the FileMaker user group community worldwide. Now, a quick note from our sponsor. This broadcast is funded and sponsored by LearningFileMaker.com, where you can purchase a video training course for FileMaker Pro or a separate video course specific to FileMaker Go. So once again, we always thank our sponsors for underwriting the cost of this broadcast and production. Now, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Todd Geist. Todd Geist is the CEO and El Presidente of Geist Interactive, based in Southern California. Todd is one of the sharpest people I know in the FileMaker community, and he's a very giving individual, which means that he frequently comes out to user group meetings or developer conferences and gives of his own time to present on rather advanced topics. Now, most of the time, Todd is educating us on all sorts of new and advanced capabilities in the FileMaker platform. However, for this user group meeting, Todd was also able to show us a new product that he's releasing specific to the FileMaker platform and the integration with it with QuickBooks Online. So without further ado, let's kick this off to Todd.
Are we ready to go?
We're live and online.
We're live?
We're good.
Live and ready to go? Oh my goodness, so that's a full house. This is the title for the talk, Building Apps in 2015. And some of you may be confused, as that was not anywhere in the description that I wrote and sent up here. But there's a thread to the stuff that I did put in that description, and it's really the kind of, it's the stuff that I'm excited about. And the reason I'm excited about it is because I think that right now is a good time to be in the FileMaker world. I think we have a great product with a lot of great third-party tools and a lot of great ideas that are percolating out there. And I think we can do some awesome stuff. So that's the thread that's going to be kind of going through this whole thing. And we're going to be talking about a couple different topics. But basically, it's going to be why it's so cool to be building apps now and building apps with FileMaker. So this is the usual Who Am I slide. I started with FileMaker in the early 90s. Founded Geist Interactive, which is my consulting group. And then also founded ModularFileMaker.org. Can I get a show of hands for people who've been to Modular FileMaker? Wow, that's awesome. That's well over half the people. That's really great. We're pretty happy with how things have gone there. It's been really great. Lots of great shareable code up on that site, and the principles and guidelines that are part of that really do inform some of the stuff we're going to talk about later tonight. So here's some contact information. You can find me through any one of those places there. Email, Twitter, GitHub, at my website. I live in Southern California. In the upper right is my wife and I. That's Lori Peters. She and I founded OneSpark Academy, which some of you heard me talk about, which is a nonprofit alternative education program that we do as well. On the left, that's my dog Conan and I taking a nap. And I just like to look at him, so I put him on the screen. He's so cute. And down the bottom, that's Alfie. So that's our family. Alfie's little Sheltie. He's the old man. He's 15, so 105 in dog years, but he still gets up and chases the young one around, and he's still going strong. So Geist Interactive, what do we do? Well, I'm going to talk a lot about the products, but we also do consulting and we do training. But we're going to talk tonight about really a couple products and then a concept. But just to run through what we do, FMQBO is the new QuickBooks connector that we have coming out very soon, and it'll be in a wider beta next week actually. But that connects FileMaker to QuickBooks Online, not QuickBooks Desktop. We're basically ignoring that. We're sticking only with the online version, and it works on Macs and PCs. which is really great because we haven't had that option before. GoDraw is a drawing tool for FileMaker. You can add drawing to your FileMaker layout. People can take photographs, annotate them, scribble on them, write text on them, do all that stuff. Barcode Creator, which is a product that Jeremy over here, raise your hand, Jeremy. Jeremy and I worked on, and that was we won the FBA Excellence Award for Commercial Product of the Year last year at DevCon. So that's doing really well. And then GoSign is advanced signature capture. And then just to round it out, on the right side, you'll see Seed Code. We do a couple things with Seed Code, a couple products that we sell on their website that we develop with them. One is Seed Code Subscribe, and that is a calendaring add-on for FileMaker Server. It lets you get your FileMaker data into your calendar. And then GoSync, which is our popular mobile sync framework for FileMaker Go for building offline apps with FileMaker Go that sync to your FileMaker server. Another thing we do, and I want to point this out, we do videos. We work pretty hard on them. We got a green screen studio in the garage, so I get to stand up and pretend like there's a big screen behind me and wave like the weather guys do. And when we're done, it looks like what I'm doing on my computer is behind me. So we do a lot of these videos. Can I get a show of hands for anybody who's watched a video on my website? Cool. So about, I'd say 25% or so. We do a lot, and we'd love to, if you guys would visit, give us feedback, give us ideas on other topics you'd like to see us cover. Typically, we go kind of in-depth stuff where we dive in deep. We do sort of advanced topics. That's kind of where our niche is. Okay, so building valuable apps. I snuck a new word in there, valuable. So I bring that up because I think it's important to note that the landscape is dramatically different when it comes to creating value for your customers today as it was, say, 10 years ago or 15 years ago or 20-something years ago when I started in FileMaker. You know, back then, there wasn't an internet. You didn't have to worry about connecting to APIs. Nobody dreamed of running FileMaker on a mobile phone, right? We did have some cool web connectivity by the late 90s, but nothing like what we have today. But what's really changed is the expectations and the landscape that our apps are supposed to perform in. People expect things to run on mobile now, on iOS. They expect things to run on the web. They expect to be able to connect to web APIs. So these are things like QuickBooks or maybe FreshBooks or Basecamp or Salesforce or any of these other web APIs where you're making essentially HTTP requests to exchange data back. And so if you're going to create valuable apps that have value for your customers and sustaining value for your customers, they kind of need to play in that world. And then, of course, the fast and flexible development. We've always kind of had that with FileMaker. What I'm going to end this talk on, Select Your Connector, has really reinvigorated me when it comes to developing on FileMaker. I feel so much more effective and so much faster than I used to be based on this new model that I feel like with it, I can create radical value for my customers. And that, I think, is really awesome. And it feels like FileMaker 13. To me, that was kind of the tipping point. The stuff looks so good, and then we can deploy it on Go, we can deploy it on the web, and now with some plugins and a couple of good ideas, we can do some really awesome stuff. So let's just kick it off with a little bit of FileMaker Go. So we know why Go is a great thing. I mean, people do like the rich native apps. Web apps running on a mobile device certainly are useful, and we certainly would love to see that happen. But there is something about native apps that's really important. They usually have better connectivity to things like camera, GPS, signature capture, barcodes. They have access to to the hardware that's on the device. They have better access typically than all the web apps do. So I want to talk about barcodes. So Jeremy and I just released Barcode Creator version 1.1, and it now has QR codes. So last year's Commercial Product of the Year just got better. And we really do think it's the fastest and easiest way to add barcode creation to your solution. No fonts, no plugins, no servers. It all runs within your FileMaker solution, so it runs across the entire FileMaker platform. And I'm going to live demo here, adding it to a completely empty file. So I want somebody out there to get their timer out. And Vince, you're going to time me? You got it? All right. When I say go, let me just open up my copy of Barcode Creator, and I'm going to start with new database. And we're going to add barcodes as fast as we can to this solution, okay? So ready, set, go. All right, so I'm going to add a new file. We'll just call it BC demo. We'll add it to the desktop here. I'm going to go into the database and I'm going to add a container. And that is going to hold the barcode after it's been generated. And we're going to have a text field for some data. And then I'm going to just drag those guys out onto the layout here. And let's do minor layout. This is slowing me down. Pushing pixels. All right, we'll create a record. We're going to put in FileMaker 13 rocks as the data. Let's do that. And now the file that you get when you purchase it, I'm going to copy one folder full of scripts to my clipboard. I'm going to drop back over here. I'm going to add a couple separators just to give us some space. Paste. Okay, so there's the barcode code itself. Now I'm going to grab a simple example and drop back over to the solution, and we'll paste that right here. And I'm just going to hook it up. So we have data to encode. We know where that's going to hook up to. We're just setting a variable data to encode to that data field. And then we're going to pick a symbology, and that symbology is going to just be QR code. And then we'll stick a width of 400. We'll keep that. We'll do a height of 400 too. And last thing we got to do is just hook up the container field down the bottom. That's it. Run the script. And barcodes. Time. 1 minute 57 seconds. Broke the 2-minute barrier. Ladies and gentlemen. All right, pretty cool. Jeremy, thanks for all your hard work on that. This has been great. So we're pretty excited about that. So that's just an example of the kind of native stuff we can do with iOS. We can scan barcodes with iOS, and now we need to be able to generate the barcodes, and we can do that as well. So we get the full circle there. All right, so back to Keynote. And are there any questions before we move off Barcode Creator? We'll have time at the end too, so if you think about it, don't worry about it. All right, extensible. So we've got a lot of great extensibility tools or extendability tools. We have plugins, we have custom web publishing, PHP, we have JavaScript web viewer apps, these kind of hybrid apps like GoDraw is that. GoDraw is an HTML5 canvas-based app that runs in a web viewer in FileMaker. So we have a lot of ways to sort of extend the platform and add features to it through plugins or custom web publishing or web viewers. What I want to talk about tonight is the Base Elements plugin. So Base Elements, let me just bring up the website that has the feature list on it because it's fairly impressive. And here it is. So Base Elements is an open source plugin from the guys at Goya out of Australia. And these are all of the functions. You got dialog, clipboard, file stuff, moving and copying, XLT and JSON, URLs, HTTP requests, encoding, preferences, zips, time. We've got tons of stuff. So some new things that we just added to this that I helped inspire into the plugin are in version 3.1 alpha, which should be out pretty soon. We can now execute JavaScript with Base Elements, and that's without a web viewer. So we don't have to have a web viewer on the layout to execute JavaScript. So this is incredibly powerful. JavaScript is easily the most popular programming language on the planet. If you look at something like Node.js with its NPM package system, it has the largest number of packages available for any programming language on the planet. It's huge. It's everywhere. And so a lot of that code is now available to us as inspiration or even just as pure copy and paste into our FileMaker solutions. Now, just to set the expectations correctly, this does not include the browser APIs. So we're not talking about displaying HTML. We're not talking about HTML5 canvas or doing HTTP requests. Those are browser APIs. Those aren't actually part of the JavaScript spec. The JavaScript spec doesn't include any of the browser stuff. So what this plugin does, what this function does, execute JavaScript or evaluate JavaScript, is it'll actually run the entire JavaScript language specification up through ECMAScript 5.1, which is the current version, and even some of the newer stuff that's sneaking in now, ECMAScript 6. ECMAScript and JavaScript mean the same thing. JavaScript is trademarked. Oracle owns that name. So they could someday force us to stop using it, but they haven't yet. So the official name for JavaScript is ECMAScript, which just kind of rolls off the tongue. But anyway, so we can do some neat stuff, and I'm going to show a couple things. One of which is pretty what's the word here? Minimal, simple, but I think makes the point. So JavaScript has a regular expression engine, which means we can use regex to do things like pattern matching. So I created a simple custom function which does regex match. That's the name of the custom function. It uses behind the scenes base elements and JavaScript to actually do the regular expression matching. So if this is not a valid email address, then we can get some conditional formatting. And the way that I expressed that in the solution was through a custom function, just because I find that a relatively easy way to do it. So let's look at what that looks like here. Let me blow up my screen a bit. Kind of blurry. I hope that looks okay over there. It looks blurry to me, but hopefully it'll look all right to you. So regex match is the custom function that I created. Self is the value in the field that this conditional formatting is attached to. And this is the pattern match for email. And I spent like 3 weeks figuring that out. No, I found it on the internet. And that's kind of the beauty of JavaScript, is that if you search JavaScript, whatever it is I want to do, you will almost certainly find code that works. So this is the kind of thing. It turns out to be pretty easy. So now I have a custom function that can return if I use any. So let me just show you what that looks like in custom function so we can see. Blow that up here. All right, so this first part, this is a let statement, and this is, I'm setting a variable JS for JavaScript. And I like to use the list function to build things like JavaScript or SQL or any kind of text-based stuff that I want to build. I use the list function to do it because it's a nice, easy way to do it. You basically just go line by line. So if you screw up, you only screw up one line. It makes it a lot easier to debug. If I forget something and I've just got a long text string, it's going to be very hard to find. But with this, by using list to concatenate together line by line my JavaScript, it's way easier. So the first two lines are essentially just taking the inputs, data and regex, and I'm declaring two JavaScript variables, var data and var regex. The next line, var result equals regex exec data, is really the only thing that does anything. That is what does the pattern match. The last line merely returns it, returns the result to FileMaker as a Boolean 1 or 0, which is how we deal with Booleans. So that's it. So really, JavaScript, that's the real money code. That's it. One line. You can do all that regex stuff. And you'll find tons of stuff like that. I don't have time to go into it, but the other one that's really, really interesting is all of the cool stuff you can do with arrays. There's tons of array processing functions in JavaScript. You can do map and reduce and filter and all kinds of stuff. It's really, really powerful. It's very, very short, easy to write once you see it done, and very useful for all kinds of building complicated strings. All right, any questions so far on that? Very fast. So that's a good point. So why, right? I mean, some of this stuff you could certainly validate email without using regex, right? That's not a very impressive demonstration. I get it, but and that's true for a lot of things that you can do with JavaScript. You could probably figure out how to do it in FileMaker. In fact, since FileMaker is Turing complete, there's a case to be made that you can do anything with FileMaker that you can do with JavaScript. The likelihood of you being able to do anything isn't so high, and certainly the speed is going to be an issue. Right? JavaScript is much faster in many cases. Certainly for things like array processing and stuff that it's like really, really made for. It does really, really fast. So, and also then of course we have this huge library of code out there that can help us stuff up rapidly, and there's tons of stuff like that. So, so lots of great stuff you can do with that. What I want to talk about now is what we used it for. We're building up to the FMQBO talk, the FileMaker QuickBooks stuff. And Base Elements forms the core of that. We kind of wrap it up and not really hide it away from you, but we give it some friendly wrappers. But Base Elements is really working behind the scenes to do a lot of the stuff. And one of the things it's doing is it's giving us a way to handle JSON. How many people have used JSON? How many people have tried to write a complex JSON string in FileMaker? How many people thought they might commit suicide by the time that was over? Right. It's pretty tough, right? I mean, it's hard to do. There is a JSON module for Modular FileMaker that actually can produce JSON and do it without making you crazy, but it's doing it with FileMaker, and so it's slower than what we can do what we can do with JavaScript. So QuickBooks uses JSON or XML. We've chosen to stick with JSON to transmit the data back and forth. So that's the data serialization format. So the short, for those of you who don't or haven't used JSON or don't know much about it, JSON is really just a serialization format. It's a way of encoding data in a text string. It comes from JavaScript. It stands for JavaScript Object Notation or something like that. Yeah, JavaScript Object Notation. So it's essentially a JSON string is a valid JavaScript object, which makes it really, really great to work with in JavaScript. But it pretty much, there are now JSON parsers, and just about, and I'm sure in every major language out there has them today, because it's become sort of the de facto way to communicate on the web. And the reason is because web browsers have a JavaScript engine. So when they get JSON from a server, it's really easy and fast for them to take that JSON and parse it. So that's sort of the history behind it. That's why it is the most popular way to send data around these days, is because of the browser. That's where it came from. So if we're going to do that, if we're going to use JSON with FMQBO, we have to give you ways of building and parsing JSON that won't make you rip your hair out. So that's where we came up with this set of custom functions which ship with FMQBO. And I don't want to open remote. I just want to show the list here. Custom functions. So there's about a dozen of them or so, and they give us a nice simple syntax to build complex JSON and to parse it. And so we're going to look at in detail some of these. I think I can make it even bigger. Let's do that. Yeah. So this first function. So this is a FileMaker custom function called JSON Pretty Print. All that does is make it print out with the nice indentation so you can read it easier. JSON doesn't care about white space. This is really only for humans to be able to read it easier. So we wrap this function so the output will be nice and clean, easy to read. So what we're saying here is this first function, JSON-O, means I'm creating a new JSON object. Inside that, JSON-OP is a JSON object property. JSON is made up of objects and properties. The properties can be arrays, and the arrays can have values. A little more complicated than that, but that's essentially it. So we have a JSON object property called players, and then we have a JSON array that has 3 values, Joe, Steve, and Sarah. And then we have another property here, name and hometown. So that is FileMaker creating, it's a FileMaker syntax that creates JSON without having to do string concatenation, which is really, really a pain. And over here, that is what it comes out to be on the right. So if I run that, that's what it'll look like. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So we've given a way to build JSON without having to basically concatenate strings and track escaping and quoting and commas and semicolons and all that stuff. So we have a whole set of things that can do stuff with JSON. Let's take a look at this one over here. So here's that same bit of JSON, and we have another custom function called JSON modify. And that's going to use JavaScript to basically, it's going to take this hometown property and it's going to change it to Green Bay. So if we run that, we don't have pretty print around it. So that's what it looks like without the pretty print. All right, it's just flat, all strung together. But you can see that hometown is now Green Bay. All right, so it's that kind of thing. Those are the kind of things that we're doing. We are relying somewhat on the built-in functionality of JSON path that's in Base Elements, but a lot of this stuff we're doing with JavaScript. So I'm going to speed up a little bit and find or I'm just going to skip some of these and find one of these that's, all right, here, so, okay, here we go. So this is a little bit more complicated. This is a bill, and this is actually what a bill looks like out of QuickBooks. Okay, so that is the representation of a bill that comes from QuickBooks in JSON. Now, bills have line items. So here we have a JSON property, a JSON object property line, and this is an array, so there's more than one line. So we need an easy way to be able to parse that line. So this is really all we have to do. So JSON get is our, and this path says bill dot line, because we can use dot notation to descend into the JSON, and the 0 is the first line item. And then we're getting the detail type. So we're just getting one of the properties off of that line. So when I run that test, we're going to get that one single property. So with these custom functions, we can reach in and strategically snip out and build up JSON. Does that make sense? So again, the power of JavaScript made this relatively trivial for us to do. These functions will be included with FNQBO. They'll probably also be released on their own as a separate library. All right. Any more questions on base elements, JavaScript, JSON? Let me ask a question. How many people have tried to connect to APIs that are using JSON? So a few, not too many. That doesn't surprise me. I mean, this is kind of new stuff for us in the FileMaker world. But what I'm going to show you a little bit later, I maybe hope we'll fire you up to start experimenting with this, because again, what I really think this is a way that you can add value to your solutions by being able to connect to these other things like QuickBooks or Salesforce or Basecamp or whatever. It's not ridiculously hard to do. There are some tools out there that can help you. And once you figure it out, JSON, it looks weird at first, but it's actually fairly sane, and that's the reason why it's caught on. It's way easier than XML to kind of read and to deal with and to parse. So it becomes kind of the de facto way in which you want to start passing around data. In fact, unless I'm working with a mobile app, this is how I pass multiple parameters now. When I pass multiple parameters to a script, I use JSON. I can use JSON, like first name Todd, last name Geist, JSON object, pass it in. Right? This is the way that I hand data around my solution is through using JSON. And it can be as rich as it wants to be. It could be a couple of names, first name, last name, or it can be an entire bill. And with these tools, we can actually, you could have a script which takes a huge JSON object and parses it out. And that's pretty much what we're going to be doing next. All right. Let me make sure I'm on track with the slides here. Yeah, where are we? We're down here. Make sure I'm not leaving anything out. So, demo regex. So, okay, so base elements is going to form the kind of underlying layer of what we're going to talk about next. Most of it you won't see because we've got all that stuff wrapped up for you to make it a little easier, but it's all under there, and we're using HTTP requests that are provided by base elements. And HTTP requests we can do in FileMaker natively with insert from URL, and we can now do get post. There's a few things that you can't do without a plugin, so that's why we're using it for that. And then the ability to execute JavaScript makes this parsing of JSON and building JSON super easy. The final thing that we do, which we'll get to, is we're actually using base elements has the XML clipboard abilities that you can snag the clipboard of a FileMaker scripts off the layout, manipulate them, send them back. And we're going to be using base elements to generate all this code. So you don't actually have to write any of the stuff that I just showed you. So QuickBooks Online is a pretty powerful accounting software package. I'm sure most of you are aware of them. They've gone past desktop now. They're adding more QuickBooks Online customers than desktop. Over 100,000 new accounts per quarter. It's been around for a while, but it's really only in the last maybe year or 2 years that it hasn't sucked, to be honest. It's now quite good. It still doesn't have all the features that the desktop version does, but it will. Or even better is that those of us with FileMaker skills can build those features for our customers and provide it as custom layers on top of QuickBooks Online, which is what we're really excited about because we think it's a perfect match. QuickBooks is a great accounting package. It has some limited kind of CRM stuff, very limited, and limited workflow, really almost none. But with FileMaker, we all know how to create awesome workflow and business rules and all that stuff that we know how to do and present to our users the way that we want. What we really just need is a conduit to be able to push and pull from FileMaker to QuickBooks. And now we can. So FMQBO, it connects to QuickBooks Online, Macs and PCs. We're very excited about the Mac thing because we're pretty much all Mac. FileMaker 12 and FileMaker 13, although 13 is going to be what you're going to want to use for developing, but it'll run with 12. WebDirect, CWP, and server-side scripting work as well. Yes?
I just want to add something for all of you.
Repeat the question.
Oh, so the question wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement. At the Apple stores, apparently, they're recommending people to use QuickBooks Online as opposed to QuickBooks for Mac. The reasons are because it's the board into its policy moving forward is not to drop the desktop apps, but they're basically done. There's no more hardcore development on those apps. The APIs to those apps will no longer be improved. They're essentially going EOL on that stuff. It's like 2016 or 2017. So QuickBooks Online is the future, and FileMaker is a really, really great tool to build on top of that. It is by far the largest accounting or the most used accounting package in this country. Other countries, you know, maybe Xero down in Australia, or there's a few others out of this country. But in this country, QuickBooks is the dominant platform by far. Most accountants want you to use it, and this just gives us, man, we can do cool stuff. So, any other questions on that? All right, this is a collaboration with Dan Smith. Dan is a very smart guy from north of the border. He lives like in the middle of nowhere, Canada. Like I don't even know where he lives, but it's not in one of the few places that actually have people. No, it's not quite that bad, but it is a small town. It's somewhere like between the coasts, like due north of Idaho or something. But anyway, he's a very smart guy. He has done a lot of work with the FileMaker Standards Group. He's the guy who wrote the JSON module for native parsing and building of JSON with FileMaker. He's very, very sharp. So he's the guy I reached out to when I wanted to tackle this project. It's a little bit more than I wanted to do by myself, and I knew he had the chops to deal with the JSON and all that kind of stuff. So we're doing that together. So the goals, we're going to expose the entire V3 REST API. We don't like APIs that sort of only give you access to like invoices or something, or we're a part of the API. If you can do it with the QuickBooks API, you can do it with FMQBO. That includes batch processing. That includes everything that they have. We want it to work really well with Intuit's developer support. What that means is, what I mean by that is, Intuit has a huge developer ecosystem. Lots of support, questions and answers, Stack Overflow, forums, all that kind of stuff. We did not want to set FMQBO outside of that. We wanted to put it in that community so it could benefit from all of the technical expertise that's in there. We want to provide tools to help you with the integration, and we'll get to that in a minute. And we want to make sure that it's really well documented. And the reason for that is that QuickBooks, being such a big package, it's tough to navigate the docs. So we're going to provide a layer around that as well. Getting technical, I think we've talked about this, so I'll skip over that. So this is kind of the way it works. So FMQBO is a FileMaker file that you add to your solution. And what we've done is we've exposed the HTTP request, or the connection to QuickBooks, as a script inside of FMQBO that you need to call. It's simply called FMQBO script. You give it the right JSON, and you get back JSON in return. Okay? So your solution calls a script in FMQBO, and it gets back as a script result the result of that, whatever happened. You added an item, you deleted an invoice, you updated a customer, and if it didn't work for some reason, you're going to get an error back. So on top of that, we've added this thing called FMQBO Developer. An FMQBO Developer can read the schema in your solution, and it can actually write the code for you to do a lot of this integration. So for those of you who are like, I don't ever want to see JSON again, you actually don't really need to, because we're going to write it for you, and then you can go in with a working solution and kind of see how it works. All right, demo time. And I'll be honest, this is scary. I've not demoed this in front of such a large crowd yet, and so let's see how we go here. All right, there's my notes. Okay, so we're going to start with FMQBO Developer. The timer. Oh, we can do a timer later. It'll take a little longer.
Minute 30 seconds to make it.
Yeah, no, not quite. Okay, so we launched with a couple of, just a screen with some intro information, docs, all that stuff. How to buy a license, how to get a demo license. You can get demo licenses. They're good for 14 days. You can also get a sandbox account from Intuit, which is basically just that. It's a sandbox account. It's not your real account, but it has data in it, so you can hit it, slam it, beat it up, do all kinds of stuff. And so we tend to use that a lot when we're doing a lot of development. Then you can switch to your production account whenever you're ready. So settings, we'll look at that real quick. So you get your license and you enter it here. You can actually, if you're a developer and you're developing for multiple customers with QuickBooks, you might want to actually have a couple different licenses in here so that you can be using that to connect to QuickBooks and test things out. So that's what we have here. So I'm going to, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to test this license. And what's going to happen is, because I haven't authenticated this yet, what is going to happen is we're going to launch a web page. So we have to authenticate to QuickBooks Online, right? So that pops up. This goes, we click this button here, and because we're using the sandbox, it's going to give us some warnings, that big red box at the top, just saying, hey, this is not a real thing. We haven't approved this yet. It's because it's a sandbox. We're going to click Authorize, and that is going to authorize FMQBO to connect to my sandbox solution. So once that's done, you can close this window, and we go back to FileMaker, and at some point, it's going to recognize, I hate when that happens. Nobody saw that, right? Exactly. Didn't catch it. Lovely. Well, let's try to test the connection again. Hopefully, it'll just we'll be back. Good to go here. Yes, we're good. So it just tells me the company ID and the company name, so I know I'm connected to the right thing. This is beta software. I'm not kidding. All right. So we're going to look at what we call requests. Now, requests are this is sort of where we begin to play with our sandbox account using a FileMaker interface to kind of do it. So we're going to work with items here. That's going to be our demo. We check under the entity dropdown here. We have a whole bunch of options. So these are all of the entities that are in QuickBooks that you have access to: invoices, companies, payments, journal entries, estimate, blah 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 blah. Items are one of them. So we're going to choose items. The next thing you need to know about QuickBooks is they have what they call actions. Those actions are under this dropdown. With items, you can't delete, so delete doesn't show up here. So this is one of the ways that we're helping you, is where you can't do a delete with items. You can only make an item, you can mark an item inactive, but you can't delete it through the API. So one of the things we got here is query. So query is a way to search your items or to get all of your items in from QuickBooks. And if you look at the syntax here, it looks kind of like SQL, and it is. It's not exactly SQL, but it's pretty close. Follows the same kind of ideas. We have select star from item. So we can run that, and down here, that fast, we got something like 30-something items. So these are all, what you can see down here in the bottom. These are all of the items that are in my QuickBooks Online account in this data serialization format, JSON. Okay? So you can kind of play around and just kind of learn. Like you can say, oh, you know what? That's cool. Let's try. What if I just want, let me just get the ID and the name from item. Test request. There we go. Look, you can see there that all we get are those those two fields. We get a third field called sparse, which basically means, hey, this is a little sparse. Like, you didn't get all the attributes. And that's just so that if you're processing this later, you can know that you didn't actually retrieve all the attributes. You only got a couple of them. So you're always going to get sparse. And you're always going to get ID also, which is useful. But you can then pick out fields that you want to get if you want, or you can just get them all. Any questions so far? All right, back to star. Okay. So that's cool, but now we want to put this actually in their file. So I'm going to do a new database, and we're going to put it in the demos in FMQBO, and we're just going to call this items, and save. There's our items guy there. So one thing so I'm going to just follow the instructions that are well documented, but I kind of know them by heart, done it enough times. First thing, only thing I really need to do is we're going to add an external data source to FMQBO. So that's in the same folder. That's that. Now we have our items table. I'm going to add a single ID field because it's always a good idea to have a primary key. And the rest we're going to leave for later. Let's just make it a simple number, set the serial number. So this is our FileMaker primary ID. All right, that's all we're just going to do that. That's it. And then FMQBO developers can take over from there. So yeah, I'm gonna jump over some of the things. So what I want to be able to do is take the request that we just tested, and I want to get that into my file as quickly as possible. So this is how quickly we can do it. Actually, first I have to do this. There's a little bit of code I got to put in first. Clicking on this first, there's a button, a column on the right called code generators. These buttons actually generate code for your solution. So we're going to copy code onto your clipboard for you that you're going to paste into your file. Some of that code is static, like these custom functions. Some of that is actually dependent on the schema in your solution file. But first, custom functions, we'll get that, copy to the clipboard. We'll go to my items table. We'll say manage custom functions, and we'll paste custom functions. Pretty nifty, huh? Next thing I want to do is I got some helper scripts I'm going to put in, same deal. Copy those. Now these scripts, what's really cool about these scripts is they actually have injected into them my license. So I don't even have to do that, right? It's done. It's in here. Oops, I don't want to do that. I just want to let's give me some separators there. So we'll paste that in. This is just a client helper. We call it a client helper. It's got the license information in that came from FMQBO developer, and it's got a couple of error trap. It's got like some error dialogues to show you if you have problems, just a few things like that. Not a lot to it. Now I can start generating code for this solution to pull items in. So here's what we do. I'm going to grab this generator here, is going to copy to the clipboard a series of script steps which will do the request for me. So Siri just...
I found an article about the script on Wikipedia.
Oh,
Shall
neat.
I read it for you?
No, I don't think so. You can go away now. I said no.
Okay, I won't read it.
Woohoo! Okay. Don't say C. All right. And we'll just call it get items. And I'm going to paste. So I'm going to blow up this a little bit. So what we've got here is, this is error-trapped code that connects to QuickBooks that does the get items query. Okay? So notice, you did not have to write any JSON. You didn't have to write any HTTP requests. You didn't have to do anything other than just copy the scripts onto the clipboard and paste them into your own solution. Now to prove that that works, let's run it in Scriptdebugger. All right, so we will bring up Scriptdebugger. We will run that script. I'm going to put a stop down here. And if this works, we have a variable down at the bottom that's called items.json. Again, this script was generated dynamically based on the fact that we were on an item in FMQBO developer. It knew we were interested in items. So its variable names have the word items in it. It's not just JSON. It's items.json. So it's detailed and very specific. So let's run that. Did we just lose GoToMeeting?
No, you're still good.
Okay, good, because it bleeped at me. All right, so that ran. Here's our result, and there's our data. So we just moved that code in to my file. We did no JSON, we did no HTTP requests. It's just there. Now, this isn't really, I'm not trying to bait you all, but that seems like a pretty cool thing. Did that not register what just happened there? Is it that cool that it's just not making any sense?
Well, it has to be parsed and then parked.
It has to be parsed still, but the fact is, I didn't do any writing of code. I simply filled out an interface, and pasted the results into a script. That's all I
I
did.
think for them to be excited, they'd have to see it actually shoot itself onto it.
All right, well, let's do that then. Let's keep going. So the next thing we got to do is we have to loop, right? We got a set of JSON. Yes. Yes. It was built dynamically. Yes. The FMQBO developer knew that I was working on an item. It knew the request that I created in the UI. It knew all that stuff right here. It knew all this. It knew that I selected item. It knew that I selected query. It knew that the query was select star from item. And it custom built a script for that. That's why I think it's cool. This is not just pasting static scripts that were somewhere. We've generated the script dynamically based on what we're doing in FMQBO Developer. I think it'll get even neater as we go on. So let's just keep moving. So looping is again generated dynamically based on what we're. I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and we've got our items. We've got all the items. Now we've got to loop through them. So we'll paste that, and really that's just, again, it's dynamically generated the script with the correct variable names to match what we just did. So now we can loop. And this, again, is error trap, too, so there's no debugging I really have to do here. Then right here, it tells me I have to handle each item. So at that point in the script, I'm going to have a single item I need to deal with. So what do? We go back to the generator. We grab, so what we need to do is we're going to find the item if it already exists, or we're going to create a new record if it doesn't. So I'm going to go find, and here I'm going to do something kind of neat. So it knows that I've selected items. I'm in an items file, and I've selected an items table. And what it needs is, where is the QBO ID? In other words, where is the field that's going to store the ID that matches the QuickBooks entity, right? Well, we didn't create one. So there's nothing in here. Just have that single one. But we can create one right here. QBO ID. Add the field. It's added to the database. If you don't believe me, there it is. So we just added that field to the database for you. And now you can select it right here. And now when I click this script, we've now generated a script, some script steps that are specific to that table and field. It's starting to make some sense. So the file knows about your solution. It says, hey, tell me what your QBO ID is, and I'm going to make you a script which will find that item in your database, and if it's not there, it'll create a new one. And that's really all it's doing right here. If you look at this, enter find mode, set items QBO ID, which it just dynamically added, items JSON, the ID, so it's getting the ID from the item JSON, and it's doing the find. If it can't find it, it creates a new record. So now we've got a new record, or we found the record that was already there. We have one step left. And that is it's going to take us to another thing here that we call a field map. Now, a field map is exactly that. It maps QuickBooks entities to your FileMaker tables. Okay, so it's kind of like an import dialog. We've got this in the UI here, in this UI here, where we can, again, we've selected, we're in an items file and items table. If I look under here, it has the two fields that I've already added. Over here, let's blow this up a little bit so you can see. So it wants to know, where's the ID? Well, we already added the ID. It's that one. Right? So we can line that up. It wants to know what, and then so you can go down this list and pick the fields that you're interested in, some of which you kind of have to have. So we're going to go ahead, but since we haven't added any, we're just going to add them this way. I'm going to add something called a sync token, and we'll add that field, and that'll be at the database. You can choose a different table here if you wanted to. You can choose the table, well, I guess the file wouldn't work, but choose a different table. If you have related stuff, you would for an invoice, for example. You need to go to line items. So yeah. So I'm just going to go down and add a couple of, we're not going to add them all, we'll just add a couple. I'll add the name, and we'll add unit price, and we'll add, I will show you how you can learn that in a little bit. And we probably will add that, we'll probably expose that a little bit more. So that's all I'm going to do, just pick those, and I'm going to select them because I don't care about the rest of the entities. There's a whole bunch of things that I may not care about. Now let's add description too. Actually, you know what, we'll come back to that. No, I'm going to add it now. We're running out of time, so I'm going to add it now. So what I've done now, and if we go back and look at this table, all those fields are there. Right? So this is kind of nice, right? I can, if I forget a field from QuickBooks, I can just slam it right in and keep going with my integration. Just keep moving along. Now, so now does this make sense what we have here? It's kind of like an import map. You know, we have items, the item attributes mapped to FileMaker fields. Make sense? So guess what we can do with that information? We can generate a script, some script steps that know all about that. So we're going to choose just the only selected. I'm going to copy those to the clipboard. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go into my database. I'm going to paste those right there. And if you look down here at the bottom, it's using all those things, and it's matched with the variables that we pulled out of the JSON. So we wrote this entire, that's it. It's done. We wrote the entire thing by clicking buttons. There was no, we didn't have to run debugger, we didn't have to run script step, we didn't have to make spelling mistakes with variables, we didn't have to do any of that stuff. Now, I'm going to assert that it's done, and I'm going to assert that it works, but let's actually prove it. We'll save that script. Yeah, and let's just go over here, and let's just grab all these guys, throw it out onto the layout, and we'll make it a table view. And then one last thing I'm going to do is I want to do a show all at the bottom of the script. It'll have more impact. So show all records. There we go. And now if I run this script, we should get all of our items. Done.
Wow.
So we wrote no code. Time, I don't know how long that took. We didn't write any code. There's more to it than that. You obviously want to build, right? You want to be able to build up stuff and send the JSON over. But now that you have a field map, we have a generate that quick FMQBO interface, and we can say, give me all the script steps to build the JSON from my fields, right? Don't have to write any of it. You didn't have to write those custom functions, don't do any of that. We can generate the code dynamically based on the inputs that you give that describe your solution to QuickBooks, essentially. So, hey, I want my items table to match QuickBooks items. I want these fields to line up, and then I want you to write all the scripts for me. And that's it. That's how it works. It obviously can get a little more complicated if you have nested items like invoices, but what we're saying is we're going to generate all of that boilerplate stuff that takes all the time. If you're going to do any kind of QuickBooks integration, you're going to have to do a half a dozen or a dozen of these entities. You're not just going to do one. If you're going to do invoices, you got to do customers, items, invoices, customers, items, invoices, maybe classes and departments, and accounts, and I'm missing one, payments probably, if you want to see the payments on it. So you got to do all these things. So the tool, FMQBO Developer, will help you write all that stuff. So we walked up. We showed you the underlying stuff, which was JSON, and then we never actually had to use it to write the code. It's all in here, and we can look at it, and you can see it. We're using all those functions. Like right here, we're parsing. We're using JSON get to get the sync token out of the JSON. Right? So we're using those custom functions, but we do it for you. I think that is all I'm going to have time to show on that side of things. Let's go back to the slides. I think I'm pretty much going to go break at this point. So wider beta next week. If you want to get early access, you can go to that link. Or if you go to my website and look under products, you'll see a link to that page. Just give us your email address, and we'll send you data when it's more available. Yes, you can. You can do all kinds of stuff like that with the data in QuickBooks. You could present dashboards and reports that don't exist in QuickBooks. Like one of the ones is there's no good retainer report inside of QuickBooks. So it just doesn't show customer retainers very well. So you could create one. You could create a customer dashboard based on your QuickBooks data using the charting that we have in FileMaker. And you could put it on Instant Web Publishing. I'm sorry. Bad me. WebDirect, right? You could make it available WebDirect as a nice dashboard, and it could be pulling data right out of your QuickBooks account. Yes?
Anyway, we have an online question here.
Yes.
I'm just going to read this. It looks like QBO is dynamic and is not specific to QuickBooks. For instance, I work for a nonprofit organization that might like to get legislature and legislation info from one organization one from one organization, info that inputs information on the web. It has a JSON API.
Yes.
Could I use QBO developer for that person, or is it a QuickBooks specific? What they're doing, I think they want to hijack it and use it for other applications.
Yes, and we've certainly thought about that. In fact, the way that we're thinking about FMQBO developer is it's the first swing at this basic problem of being able to quickly consume APIs within FileMaker. But there's a lot of new stuff we're learning as we're building this, and I didn't want to try to build something too generic to get something to market. It would just take too long. By getting something to market with FMQBO developer, we're going to learn a lot about how to consume all these web APIs. And I do think we'll get to the point where we can have generators that basically say, hey, give us your JSON object, and we will write scripts for you that will connect to your service. That is definitely a long-term goal for us, but we needed to write this one first. Yeah. I think we're going to take 5 or 10 for a break.